That's right, folks. Another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm here live once again on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel, joined by two of the the best colleagues a man can ask for. You got Derek Favre, you will follow him at Derek_Favre on Twitter, and Sky Gawasco. That's Guasco on Twitter. Sky, how are you doing, sir?
Count it. Yes, sir. Celebrated another trip around the sun over the weekend. So I'm celebrating my birthday week here. Just couldn't be more happy than to be on camera with you boys.
Love it. Love it. Derek, I know it's baseball season, but I'm glad you pulled yourself away for just a minute to talk a little football once again, NFL free agency. What's going on, man?
Yeah, doing double duty here at Razzball. I had my first baseball article posted last week, and I'm back here to talk pigskin.
Yeah, man. Honestly, before we even start with this,
okay, sorry.
Unless we're gonna sing "Sweet Caroline" right around whatever the seventh inning is for our podcast, that I don't want to bother. Okay, if we're not doing it all in, we're not doing it at all. Anyway, so today we're gonna be talking about the NFL free agent market for wide receivers. If you haven't seen what we talked about last week with running backs, go check it out on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel, or go listen to it on the podcast. We also have a podcast, folks, on the audio side. Sky always likes to talk about mowing the lawn, but you know what? This day and age, it's hard to get a home. So if you're just taking a dog for a walk or whatever, pop on the audio side. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Go check out the Razzball Fantasy podcast as well. Today, folks, guys, we're going to be talking about wide receivers. Sky, first thoughts about the wide receiver market. Is there a team, a player, a situation you're kind of excited to see what happens with the most?
I think the biggest question mark is going to be Mike Evans. I don't think he stays in Tampa, but I can't figure out where else he would go. Obviously, almost every team would want him and need him, but where does it actually make sense with his money? And then I watched a lot of Michael Pittman at USC. I'm a Pac-12 guy. I like the kid a lot. I love his pops with the Bucks. I just don't think he's going to be as good somewhere else necessarily. I don't know that he's a true number one. That goes for Calvin Ridley as well. And of course, T. Higgins, I think, is the cash prize ultimately in this group, but he's coming off of an injury. So really interesting class.
Derek, first thoughts about the wide receiver class.
Yeah, so what I'm going to be looking for when the curtain goes up and these free agents start to move, who moves fast? And I mean which team moves fast to pick up some of these free agents? I think if especially for the wide receivers, if the teams are active to sign some of these players, then I really think we might see some of these guys in different uniforms. But if it's a slow moving process, then I really think that some of these guys are going to go back to where they came from. So really those first few days of the free agent market, I think, is really going to dictate how things go.
You sound like a mean guy in like an old movie where you're like, go back where you came from,
That's
wide
right.
receivers, like, all right, folks. Well, I do think the franchise tag will be a huge factor in this whole thing. I do think Michael Pittman and T. Higgins especially will be getting the tag. Mike Evans, it sounds like because of the number, he will have the option to explore. There are some rumblings that he's going to wait to see what Baker does. Now, Mike Evans does have the opportunity for the first time in his career to go test the market, truly go out and test the market. He is in his 30s now. He probably wants to be on a win now team. So the question is, does he give a team like a Chiefs, for example, or Buffalo or whatever, a top level team, a chance to talk in free agency with him, even if Baker returns? And if he does leave, we always like to remind everybody, by the way, don't worry. The players are going to get the headlines. You're going to think about T. Higgins. You're going to think about Michael Pittman. You're going to think about Mike Evans. But do not forget the implications of the teams they leave. If, for example, Mike Evans does leave in free agency, Chris Godwin becomes an intriguing player to go get in dynasty leagues. He'll also be undervalued probably based on his performance in 2023. So don't forget about those caveats. Even a guy like Cade Otton, who showed good rapport down the stretch. So don't forget about free agency in reverse. That's always another way to look at these things as well. But let's kind of run through some of these bigger names on the list before we get into some of your thoughts and kind of some other situations here. But we got Evans, Pittman, and of course, T. Higgins, but Calvin Ridley might be the number 2 of the available receivers that we think are actually going to hit the market. Guys like Kendrick Bourne, Noah Brown, Curtis Samuel. I also really like Marquise Brown. I think there's still something there for him. I think he's better suited as a number 2. Kind of been forced into number 1 roles over the last few years. Hasn't really produced at a high level, but I do like him as a receiver, and I think he could thrive as a number 2. You got Gabe Davis. based on all his social media posts these past few days, he sounds like he's leaving. Michael Thomas, does he have anything left in the tank? Tyler Boyd, who broke my heart 4 years ago, and I haven't spoken to him since. DJ Chark. Odell Beckham, does he come back for another season? Then there's guys like Josh Reynolds and KJ Osborne as well. So that could be a factor. Now, Sky, is there any kind of deeper names, maybe mid-tier guys you're kind of looking at on this list that, or maybe someone we haven't even brought up that you're kind of looking at thinking, you know what, I would love to see him land to X place?
Yeah, man, a top 10 wide receiver free agent for me personally, that's number 20 on this list, and nobody's talking about anymore, is Darnell Mooney. And I know he's disappeared for the last year and a half, but this kid came out. He was awesome working with nothing in Chicago, which nobody's been working with anything in Chicago my entire lifetime. But unfortunately, he got injured. Then he lost some playing time. DJ Moore comes over. He becomes the number one. Fields gets hurt, even when they have a nice little stretch there. If Darnell Mooney doesn't get retained by the Bears for free and they just need bodies out there, they'll probably move away from Fields. We'll see what happens, but they need bodies out there in Chicago. If they do move away from him, I think he's a prime candidate to replace probably T. Higgins. I actually disagree with you on that. We can dive in a little deeper if you'd like on T. Higgins specifically, but I actually think he's the one to leave Cincinnati, and I think Tyler Boyd stays as the longtime veteran guy there. But Darnell Mooney would be a nice deeper threat, change of pace there to complement Jamar Chase on the outside there. So Darnell Mooney is just a name that I think is totally fallen off the radar, and he's free in Dynasty right now. He's definitely going to be free in redraft, and he's just a player that I really like when healthy, and I think he's going to make an impact here, and nobody's talking about him.
I got to tell you this. When I wrote that down, I actually have him in my top 10 as well for free agent wide receivers. Yeah. Here's an interesting thing. By the way, the coaching staff that brought him into the league was Matt Nagy. Now the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. I was thinking, man, talk about a low, like middle range wide receiver that they don't need to pay too much for. But man, if he plops over to the Chiefs and play alongside Rashid Rice with Mahomes and Travis Kelce, like what a great upgrade he would be in that offense. He also has ties to teams like the Texans. His former OC was Bill Lazor for the Bears for a year. He's now down in Texas with the Texans. His wide receiver coach that year, Chris Jackson, is also with the Texans. And listen, they have a bunch of talent, but if they feel like Tank Dell's going to need some time and they want to, upgrade the roster behind Nico Collins with the talent they have with CJ Stroud while he's still on that rookie contract, I absolutely love that too. Dave Ragone, who was his quarterback coach during that time. He's with the Rams. So I don't really think that's a really connection there. But is there any kind of name, Derek, for you that kind of stands out? What's your thoughts about Mooney and or another name that you kind of want to highlight?
Yeah, I've got a kind of a below the radar name that I think is going to quietly probably fit really well on a number of teams, and that's Noah Brown. I don't see him going back to the Texans, with Nico Collins and Tank Dell there. I think he's, only 28 years old. He's going to have a very reasonable asking price. And I mean, okay, he is coming off a shoulder injury, but I'm not really all that worried about that. And I just think he fits really well as a number two somewhere who have a really established, top wide receiver. I think he could really be a good fit for a number of teams.
And by the way, I don't know what was in the water in Houston, but those receivers, when they got a chance to be the number one guy, all went off. Tank Dell, Nico, Noah Brown even had his moments where you're like, what is going on down there? Honestly, it seems like Noah Brown, it makes a ton of sense, especially with the Tank Dell injury, to come back. Knows the offense, played well in it. If Tank Dell is kind of slow to get started, maybe it makes sense to bring him back, but he did play really well. The situation I would like to say, I think I'm watching the most is the Arizona Cardinals with Marquise Brown. Most of that has to do with Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson didn't do a lot the whole season, but if you look at the last two games when he played with Kyler Murray, he kind of flashed. He showed that he could, take on a little bit of a bigger role. And he's probably a guy right now that you could probably flirt getting a late second, early third round dynasty pick to trade for him. And he's probably got a lot more upside than that with this offense. The fact that Marquise Brown, by the way, was traded for by the previous regime means that they're probably not, they're not going to go break the bank for Marquise Brown. So I think he does walk. Now, Trey McBride's another guy I love from that situation too. So, but Marquise Brown himself, I do think he's a good number two wide receiver. I do think he would be great in multiple spots. But let's talk about some of the bigger spots, kind of the teams that Here's the list I made. You guys tell me what you think. Obviously here, I think the Giants are probably one of my favorite landing spots for a number 1 wide receiver. I do like Jalen Hyatt. I do like Wan'Dale Robinson, but I think they're better suited as complementary pieces. But if the Giants can get a number 1, that would be awesome. But I can see them doing something stupid like getting Gabe Davis, and that'll just be miserable. The Bills, we'll see with Stephon Diggs. Khalil Shakur could obviously step in there too. If Diggs is on the move, that could be another team that really needs a player. The Jets, number 2 wide receiver behind. I know Sky's probably thinking, what are you talking about? They already got Devontae Adams, but unfortunately they don't as of today. Their number 2 receiver spot with Aaron Rodgers could be very profitable for fantasy if someone steps in. The Patriots, Alex Van Pelt, new head coach. They don't really have a number 1 wide receiver. We'll see what they do there. Cardinals are another team. I did bring them up just before. They could have a hole with Marquise Brown leaving. The Falcons behind Drake London have a brand new offense coming in with Zach Robinson, 11 personnel. They're going to run a lot more 3 receiver sets. So they're going to need wide receivers on that team. Panthers, Bears, Chiefs, Titans are a couple other teams that I kind of highlighted here. Sky, do you have kind of a landing spot that you really like for a wide receiver? Kind of like a 1-for-1, maybe a player in the market, or is this just a destination in general you'd like to see upgrade the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Calvin Ridley back to the Falcons, actually. I like, first of all, they have the money. Secondly, they have a bunch of these rookie contracts. Bijan, Algier, Kyle Pitts, whoever their quarterback's going to be. It's very cheap for them. Their defense is not expensive either. And Calvin Ridley is going to come with a cost, not as much as last year, obviously. But if he doesn't go, I don't know, to like the Chiefs or the Bills or something like that, like an immediate contender just to be a number 2, 3, I think he could maybe not the number 1, but get back out there to Atlanta and be an immediate impact. I think they could absorb what he needs. Another year coming out of that 1.5-year suspension. He did flash last year, just didn't quite click with Trevor Lawrence the way that we thought. But honestly, Trevor didn't really click with anybody the way that we thought last year. So maybe it's not so much a Calvin Ridley thing. There was obviously a lot of like out of bounds plays and random tackles on the one. So a couple different inches, and I think his season could have gone a lot differently. But for me, a dream scenario actually outside of Evans and Pittman and T. Higgins would actually be Ridley back to the Falcons.
I like that a lot. Now, Derek, any thoughts about kind of a landing spot, a team in need, and or a player that you kind of want to put in that place or something like that?
Yeah, believe it or not, I think they're a team in need, and I think a lot of these top, or maybe the top wide receivers, or certainly the second tier, are going to want to go to is the Lions. I mean, Josh Reynolds, he's a fine receiver, but he's not really a game changer opposite St. Brown. And can you imagine?
He's leaving too.
Yeah, can you imagine? Because Jameson Williams is not a number 2 yet. He just hasn't shown it. So, you add, someone like a T. Higgins or even, dare you say, a Gabe Davis to the Lions and all those weapons. I mean, I wouldn't want to do that to the Lions and give Gabe Davis, but you give them a 1B to St. Brown. That Lions offense is already, stout. It's just going to be even that much better. And I think some of these if the money's right, these wide receivers are going to want to play for Detroit because they're going to be competing for the titles for the next few years.
Yeah, I think I'm interested to see what the Patriots do. I am the Alex Van Pelt OC thing is kind of like, I don't love it necessarily. It seemed like the Browns were just kind of like, oh no, Alex Van Pelt's leaving. Like if they didn't really care that much to let him just go to another team, and I do think the lack of development with Baker Mayfield and also Deshaun Watson is a little alarming. Prior to Joe Flacco, there wasn't a Browns quarterback in that regime that really improved a significant amount to make you excited for. But that being said, they are bringing in a rookie quarterback, most likely with the 3rd overall pick. So there isn't just a huge target value. I love Kendrick Bourne. Probably. I know, Sky, you're a 49ers guy. You like Kendrick Bourne as well. But he actually really improved over the last few years. And I actually was really excited about him this season before his injury. And he started looking pretty good right before he went down. But he's coming off a major injury. Devontae Parker's now in his 30s. Hasn't looked their part. Demario Douglas is an interesting player. But I do think this is a team that if you do bring in a number 3 overall pick, they need to go out and get some like legit talent on this team. Now, I don't really see a connection necessarily to, the Patriots necessarily for any of these free agents, but, Tyler Boyd types I could see kind of landing there. And they bring him in and, they're like, hey, this is our, slot guy. We want to use him more. Like maybe they don't view Demario Douglas because this is kind of like a new offensive coaching staff. So I'm interested there as well. But overall, I think the most intriguing is what if the Chiefs finally get a number 2. I mean, if the Chiefs can go out and get themselves a number 2 receiver, I mean, Darnell Mooney to the Chiefs, I already have it in my head. So I want that just to happen. I'm in. So I'm in for that. Some other things I do think are important are the cap casualties. We got guys like Tyler Lockett and, Hunter Renfrow, Allen Robinson, which we don't really care about. The Steelers have enough depth there. But there's some other big names. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh comes into the Chargers situation. Guys like Mike Evans and Keenan Allen have gigantic cap numbers and could offer savings if they're cut. I personally think it makes some sense to cut a guy like Mike Williams, my apologies. Maybe not so much Keenan Allen, but still, we don't know what Jim Harbaugh thinks of that offense and who he wants there as well. There's other names like Tim Patrick, who just unfortunately has not been able to stay healthy. Does he get cut? He's a big savings as well for the Denver Broncos. Deeper names like Russell Gage. I think the big one really there is probably Tyler Lockett and Mike Williams. Sky, do you have any thoughts about any potential cap casualties?
Yeah, that's a big one. Mike Williams just can't stay healthy. I mean, arguably one of the most dominant wide receivers, just play for play in the NFL the last 5 years. When healthy, can't stay healthy, period. Tyler Lockett is going to be that's a great guy to go to the Chiefs, man, to be honest with you. Just a guy that's quiet, does his job. He's going to be a great, excellent route runner, blah, 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 always open. Scramble drill with Russell Wilson for years, always found the open spot. That's how Mahomes gets it done with Kelsey and everybody else. So I think that's a good move there. But yeah, I totally agree, man. The issue that I think the casual fantasy manager overlooks is the money piece of this. This is all above people like us, pedestrian money. We can't think of millions and millions and millions in like a reality sense, right? But certain amounts of millions of dollars don't matter. Like $2 million doesn't matter in NFL terms, right? But you start talking about a guy, like Curtis Samuel, for example, 21.5 million guaranteed, right? Like just not doing what he can do anymore. So very surprising names are going to get cut from rosters because of money, but also roster positioning. So again, in Dynasty, that's more of a pay attention. But as Bob said earlier, look for that next man up mentality if some of these guys leave. But I do think that's a good call with JSN right behind Lockett there in Seattle and the new coaching scheme there. So I could definitely see him moving on. He's going to be a great get for whoever he moves on to because Tyler's not been tackled hard in his whole career. He's smart because he's small, and I think he's going to have plenty of gas in the tank, even though he's getting older.
Yeah, JSN too will finally get some more opportunities there as well if that finally opens up. I just watched a mock draft today, and the guy was talking about your boy from Oregon potentially going, or not Oregon, not Bo Nix. J.J. McCarthy was getting drafted by the Seahawks. Thoughts?
Yeah, I can see it.
Do you like it? Yeah,
I could see it.
The Mike McDaniel thing. That's the obvious thing right there.
Yeah, I think, without diving too deep into draft season stuff, which we'll get into here shortly, but I have been starting to run out my rookie draft picks and who looks where and whatever. JJ McCarthy I've liked, and I think that the industry has too, but at Michigan, he just didn't have to do a lot as a quarterback. Not that he couldn't do a lot. We saw him go off in the national championship and they blew him out, right? He can do it, but now they're in like pro days, right? And they're going to have this combine coming up. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. And I love my boy Bo Nix. Obviously, I'm a Duck homer, but he hasn't looked great. Penix hasn't looked great. And I've been telling people all year that, I think that scheme in Washington made Penix look better than he actually is. I'm rooting for him because he's left-handed. But anyway, we'll see what happens with the rookie quarterbacks. But nonetheless, guys like Tyler Lockett and some of these other guys that might get cut doesn't mean they're done for the NFL. It just means in that particular scenario with that particular team, it's no longer a good fit. I do expect those guys to land another quality spot, though, and hopefully they can keep producing.
Now, Derek, is there, outside of cap casualties, there's guys like Stephon Diggs that could be trade candidates, and obviously there's that market of this piece as well. Is there anything you kind of have a gut feeling about, whether it's a cap casualty or trade, that you think might happen this offseason or you'd be watching out for?
Yeah, I think Stephon Diggs has played his last game in Buffalo as a Bill. Anyway, I'm not sure where he's going to go or how he's going to, get there. I did mention Dallas being a landing spot for him at one time, and I still think that makes sense. I could see him in with the star on his helmet. But you get into the cap casualties. I mean, you mentioned it already, but that's really the big one I'm watching is what are the Chargers going to do with their two? Right. I agree. I think Mike Williams is going to be cut, and Keenan Allen. I mean, if I remember right, I think his cap number is either 32 or 34 million. I mean, it's a huge number. They're going to have to spread that out. Maybe restructure his contract, keep him around, spread that out, and use those funds. I mean, you could probably bring in 2 of these wide receivers we're talking about, which would be a huge upgrade, for Justin Herbert, and that would be a really good investment for the Chargers to keep Allen and add 2 more for the price of what they're saving with Allen and Mike Williams. So that's really a big one I'm watching because there's so much at play there with Chargers, and of course they're an exciting situation right now to watch, and they've got just so many moving parts, and that's one, especially with those wide receivers that I'm keeping an eye on.
2 names that you could quickly fill in and not be very expensive would be KJ Osborne, who I think could be 85% Mike Williams, and then Gabe Davis. And I know we all kind of shit on Gabe Davis because when we start him, he doesn't do anything. Then you bench him and he goes off. I get he's frustrated and he's not maybe the best polished receiver, but he's a giant. And that's what the Chargers like. They always have. Back to Vincent Jackson days with Phillip Rivers. Like, Justin Herbert just needs weapons and they need depth. I don't know why it happens with the Chargers every single year. They just can't stay healthy. So they just need capable bodies to keep running them out there. Keenan Allen was the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy football when Justin Herbert went down and Keenan had his own. Like, he's going to be fine. I know he's older, but he's going to be fine. He also missed like 3 of his first 4 years due to injuries. Like, he had a lacerated spleen and some weird stuff. So like his body, I don't think is as old as his age as far as wide receiver goes. So I think Keenan is going to be just fine, but they just need to collect bodies. And I think KJ Osborne and Gabe Davis would be nice, very cheap fits of guys just looking to land a roster spot with Herbert in that offense.
I have a crazy idea. What about Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnston? Like, you have these guys where I know Josh Palmer's legit.
Josh Palmer's fine, and year. Herbert loves him.
And Johnston is, to be determined. And of course, the new regime's coming in. We have no idea what Jim Harbaugh thinks of Quentin Johnston. He could view this as a trade asset during the draft. Like, hey, some other team probably has a high grade on this kid from last year. Maybe they'll get a 2nd round pick and take it. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but at the same time, they do have some depth. But if you look at the 4 players that are making up so much of their cap, it's Bosa, it's Mack, it's Allen, it's Mike Williams, outside of Justin Herbert, who, of course, they're not going to get rid of. So one of those 4 guys, maybe 2 of those guys are probably going to be cap casualties this offseason. So I'll just be watching out for that. I do have a question here before we get into the final free agent predictions, brought to you by Razzball.com. All right. Is Kamara cheaper for New Orleans to hold on to in 2024 than cuts? Sorry if you already discussed. Well, Andrew P52, this is the wide receiver free agency preview. We did go over the running backs last week, but we can't answer this question for you. So right now today, his dead cap hit for 2024 is $17 million. That's Alvin Kamara. They technically could save $11.8 million against the cap if they release him after 6-1. So there is savings for a guy like Kamara. I just don't see it happening. This offense runs through Kamara. And by the way, I know the cap is his base salary is $10 million. So yeah, it does. The dead cap hit is doesn't seem like it's that much. It doesn't seem like there's enough on the bone there to save for him. I'm going to say he's going to stay with the team, even if there is a savings on the cap. But yeah, that's my thoughts there. All right, let's jump into quickly, guys, our predictions for some of the top free agents. So I'm going to go through the top 5 guys. Just one word. Let me know what you think. Are they staying? Are they going? If they're going, tell me a prediction. Mike Evans. Derek, you go first. Do you think Mike Evans returns to Tampa Bay or he leaves this offseason?
I think he leaves. I think he's going to have a number of offers thrown at him. And I like him going to Kansas City.
Ugh.
Okay. That would be insane. Sky?
Yeah, it would be. I have him staying right now, but I'm getting more reports that he's not going to stay. So we'll see. But I have him staying right now in the Bucs.
I do think he stays, but here's a crazy one. He returns to Baltimore with Todd Monken returns and plays with Lamar Jackson and plays for a Super Bowl contending team.
Love it.
That would be my bold take.
He's only him and Derrick Henry are the same, right? They've proven what they're going to prove in the NFL. I think they're both Hall of Famers, whatever. Mike Evans and Derrick Henry are going to leave only to a max competitor, not like a bubble playoff team, like playing for the Super Bowl. So you're right. Ravens, Chiefs, whatever, list 4 or 5 different teams that Mike Evans would go to, but I agree.
Baker was awesome this year, right? He was. But they're not going to win the Super Bowl with Baker. Like, they're not. Like, I mean, this was an overachieving season, and I could see the Bucs being this year's version of the Seahawks. Geno surprised everybody. They get a book on Baker, and then Baker returns to kind of what is normal. I think Baker, if he plays like this the rest of his career, that's awesome, but he's never going to beat the elites. So that's the only problem with like rolling with Baker and hitching your wagon to him. All right, jump down to Michael Pittman. Derek, do you think he returns to the Colts or he goes somewhere else?
Stays. Yeah, he's a really good fit there. I think there's a great match, and I think he stays.
Scott?
I think he stays as well. If he leaves, he goes to the Panthers.
The Panthers. Okay. I like it. I'm actually going to say he stays. I think that one's a lock. All right, let's go to number 3, T. Higgins. What do you think, Derek?
Gone. Yeah, athletic receiver. I think he's going to have a number of offers as well, and he's going to take the best situation for him, whether it's money or situation. So yeah, I think he moves on.
Moves on to Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. They used to play at Clemson together. Besties, back down to the South. I think he's a Jag.
All right. I think he gets franchise tag and he stays with the Bengals. That's where I'm going there. Let's jump down to number 4. We can start getting a little into the semantics here of who's number 4, 5, whatever. I'm actually going to ask Marquise Brown. I think he is probably one of the better guys out there right now behind. Well, I would probably say Calvin Ridley. Let's go Calvin Ridley first. Calvin Ridley at 4. Where do you think, Derek? Returns to the Jags, goes somewhere else?
No, he's gone. And I put him somewhere like Denver or even maybe the number 2 with the Chargers.
Ooh. Yeah. Andrew, first of all, I don't want that to happen. I just ran the numbers. I think it could happen. That's my suggestion, but I'm with you. I don't want Pittman on the Panthers. I promise. Sorry to heck something like that. I mentioned it earlier. Calvin Ridley back to the Falcons.
And you know what's crazy? I love that because Raheem Morris, remember, was down there when they drafted Ridley, and now he's back there again. And it's like, hey, man, come back. I'm back. He was a part of that team, interim head coach during that time, too. He had some of his best seasons. I love that call. The last one, number 5, Marquise Brown, stays with the Cardinals or moves on. What do you think, Derek?
I think he goes back to Baltimore. I think that would be a really good homecoming for him. Go back to Baltimore, at least get to the Super Bowl, play in the Super Bowl.
I like that one. I think this is another name that could go to the Chiefs. I think like all of us are going to be excited about an Evans or a Pittman or a Ridley, some of these massive names going to the Chiefs because of the Chiefs, but the Chiefs don't really do that. They got rid of Tyreek Hill. Let's not forget.
Yeah, right.
I feel like Marquise Brown could go there and just be a take the top off guy. I mean, nobody's Tyreek Hill, but Marquise Brown has definitely been that type of receiver throughout his career. So if he leaves Arizona, which actually I don't think he does, but if he does, he could keep the same color scheme and go to Kansas City.
My shot is he goes to the Jets to be the number 2 receiver for the New York Jets with Aaron Rodgers. Give him his last ride. His former wide receiver coach, Sean Jefferson, now is with the Jets. All right, that's all we got today, folks. That was our NFL wide receiver free agency preview and predictions. Make sure you subscribe to the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Jump over to IG and TikTok. And, of course, make sure you go follow these handsome gentlemen, by the way. You got Derek Favret. Follow him at Derek_Favret on Twitter. Sky Gawasko at Sky Gawasko. And myself, Bobby Lamarco at Bobby Lamarco on Twitter. Thank you again for joining us. Make sure you go over to Razzball.com and check out all the great content for baseball, basketball, hockey, and more. And don't forget to listen to us on the podcast side as well. Thank you for joining once again, folks. We are out of here.